The worst thing that one can have in such circumstances, you'll be surprised, baby, is hope. You know, hope is the most dangerous thing. Toughest moment of all, where the realization that my dream is actually a nightmare. So as the snake coming, I just fall, and I'm falling down off the tree and started chasing the snake. And then with the stick, I hit the snake, and the snake fell off the tree. I rushed down after it and killed it. I cleaned, pulled the skin, I pulled the guts, and I was about to eat it. There were jaguars around me every single night. I couldn't sleep. I cried. I felt that, that breakdown of my personality. If you ask what would you take to the jungle if you would take only one thing, the answer is machete. There's no question about it. That's the basic survival tool in the jungle. In a way, that's maybe the most powerful transformational experience one can have. For 4 days, I was walking up towards him. I was, trying to signal to scream. 4 days alone in the jungle.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audience
Okay.
from around the globe. This is your host, Sid, and it is wonderful to have you back with us for another episode of Sit Down with Sid podcast, where we bring people together one conversation at a time. Today, we are exploring the absolute limits of human endurance. We want to examine how the human spirit sustains itself when stripped of every modern comfort and pushed into a raw fight for survival. Joining us today is Yossi Ghinsberg. In 1981, a trek into the Bolivian Amazon turned into a harrowing 3 week struggle after Yossi was separated from his team with no supplies. His ordeal surviving the jungle's most relentless dangers was later captured in the best selling book and major motion picture Jungle. Today, Yossi is a global speaker who translates that experience into a philosophy of resilience. Yossi, as we continue our Survivor series, your journey is a masterclass for our audience. It is a profound honor to have you here, and we welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Sid. I'm honored to be with you, and I'm looking forward to this session.
Perfect. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, Yossi, for those who are just meeting you today, could you take us back to the early 1980s? Before you stepped foot into the Amazon, who was the young Yossi Ginsberg and what were you searching for in life?
Um, I was born in Tel Aviv, um, at the age of I was pretty normal childhood, I would say. What made me distinct to my recollection, um, I read a lot of books. This is time before computing, for mobile phones, and even in Israel at the time, it was before television. Television arrived in Israel in 1967. Our family were late to get this device, and somehow, until this very day, I never connected to television. Like I never own a TV, and it's not a medium I consume. Um, so I remember books as a major aspect of my life. I always had a book on me, especially at school, and it wasn't my studies. It was a book from the library. We were borrowing books at that time. There was a library in every neighborhood, and there was even like a mobile library, like a car, like the car that sell ice cream, and they have this like special tune. We had a car that would come to the neighborhood and was just a library borrowing books. I read many books, and that's something that accompanied me throughout my childhood. And I say that because it's completely related to the adventures that came. It was a literal adventure in the sense that the ideas and the inspiration and the hallucination came from books. By hallucination, I mean that I had this tendency, and that was very strange because later I actually read a book about it um, that is called like the never-ending story. So uh, Michael Anda, that's a very classic book. But what's special for me about this book is that the boys are Bastian, the name of the protagonist, the hero of this story, that in the middle of the story is about him reading a book. But in the middle of the book, he realizes that actually he is the hero that he is reading. Suddenly, the frail child that reads the book discovers himself inside the pages of the book, and he realizes he's the hero of the story. Something like that happened to me almost with every book I read. I was reading the book, but my imagination would be activated, and I would start seeing myself as part of that story, putting myself inside the plot. A lot of adventure books, and my imagination always drew me inside that story, but not in an active way. If I became part of the story, so something very particular. And when um, you know, I would say also that it came together with classic schooling, which means very great boredom at school. I would say, I was intelligent kid, like I could absorb material pretty quickly, but I couldn't stand the boredom of the classroom. I would just, like I couldn't keep up. So what I discovered that if I don't learn at all, but before the exam, if I study, I pass. I pass with 8.5, and but I pass, and then I stopped studying. I didn't study. I was just reading books or playing basketball. This is the two things that I did through public schools and high school. Anyway, other than that, I was a normal, for Israel in the early 60s, normal. What it means normal. My parents were Holocaust survivor. That was all normal, for my generation. And so we grew up, his parents were themselves immigrants, but all immigrants in a very dire circumstances and very heavy stories that we all, as children, we grew up like that. And this was normal. Yeah, this was normal. And uh, wars, I remember, were part of life. At the age of 8, and it was the 6 Days War. I remember being in a shelter, and I remember that already I felt like a sense of commitment to uh, the effort of the war. At the age of 8, at that time, the way it expressed itself in me is I was actually leaving the shelter and waiting on the pavement outside the house to catch people that didn't make it home to their own shelter, and I would invite them. This was at 8 years old, and it was my own initiative. I would invite people, say, "Come, we have a shelter. Come!" And I would pull people from the streets to our shelter. This is a very early memory. Unfortunately, this memory is, we're talking about last week, not about, like 1967. It's still the same. We are still in shelters in the country. So that leads me to tell you why I decided to travel to South America. Um, a combination of the two things. One, my imagination was ignited by great adventure books, especially one that is called called Papillon. Papillon was written by Henri Charrier, a French convict that spent time on the Devil's Island, but his spirit was unbreakable, unbreakable. And whatever they did to him, years of confinement alone, and punishment and torture, but he kept on trying to escape, which is not simple to escape from the Devil's Island. In the end, he managed to escape, and they were chasing him, and he's floating on a raft made from coconuts, and somehow washed to the Venezuelan shores and escapes into the jungle, and there he finds the tribes that were never touched by civilization, and they actually rescue him and adopt him, and he becomes one of the member. And the serene beauty of the Amazon and his life with this tribe ignited my imagination, and then came a decision: I will do something like that. I will go into the Amazon, and I will find a tribe that was never met before. I'll be the first one to be there, and I'll become one of the tribe. I'll marry the daughter of the chief. I'll find a great treasure, and I'll be, I'll be a hero. So the combination of two things: my imagination, the big story, and also I think something in the realization that I am the hero. When you talk about my corporate work with my story and the philosophy of resilience, beyond that is the understanding the life. We must be the story, the hero of the story. Our life is a story. And if our life is a story, who is the hero? If you're not the hero of your story, something is wrong. That's your life. It's your story. You have to be a hero. And in that sense, we all have to be heroes. But to be hero is not just a word. Heroes mean something. Later, when I discovered Joseph Campbell with his canonic work about like the hero's journey, there's actually it's pretty accurate what a hero has to do. He has to go towards his fear and overcome his fear. He has to leave the mundane. He has to leave the comfort zone and meet the dragons and do his fight. And by the way, the hero's journey of Campbell is circular. You never finish the journey. You finish one journey, another bigger one begins. Like the hero journey is not something that you'll ever complete. It's a way of life. So be careful of me. You ask a simple quick question. 15 minutes later, I give you back the mic. So sorry about it.
No, this is quite fascinating, and I can see, they say manifestation of thoughts. Thoughts become things. You were so fascinated by this adventure novel book. You wanted to be that character, and in real life, you did become that character. And instead of finding a treasure, maybe you found yourself, and you became an inspiration to the others. And so, and I did not know that your parents were a Holocaust survivor. So it is great that you have shared your background all the way from your childhood days to how you landed in Amazon. It's great. Take your time, uncensored, unfiltered. There is no time constraint. You can take as long as you want. Okay.
Okay.
I want to give you the floor now. So we often read about your story in books or see it in the films, but you were the one living on the ground. Walk us through that moment when the raft hit the rock and you were separated from Kevin. Take us from that initial isolation to the realization that you were actually truly alone in this massive jungle.
Yeah. Well, you go straight maybe to the toughest moment of all, where the realization that my dream is actually a nightmare. That moment where the dream that I dreamt all my life, suddenly I realized it's actually the worst nightmare possible, my dream. When the accident happened, you don't have much time to think in a moment like that. I found myself like the raft crashed, and it separated us. Kevin remained on the bank, and I was taken down. When by some miracle, I don't know how, I managed to get out of this river. There were like at least a good 20 minutes of white water that I passed alone. So I knew that Kevin was behind me. And I also remembered, it was clear that he was on the same bank as I was. And I knew that it was like, how long can it be? 20 that I was taken by the river. So, as deep as the accident was in terms of the shock and finding myself alive on the bank, I knew that Kevin is coming down. Okay, I knew he must be coming down after me, and tomorrow we'll be together. So in my head, it was an accident, but everything is gonna be all right because Kevin was a figure, like he was a big guy and very experienced, and he was older than me. And I was 22, he was 29. He had years of being on the road. He was very experienced traveler, but he grew up in nature. He was a professional whitewater rafter, and big, strong, young man at his prime. And there's also a relationship issue. He was much more, I would say, he was much more dominant. I looked up to him, and that rafting idea was his, not mine. And more than that, in a way, I didn't even want to do it. I didn't want to get on the raft, but I didn't want to let him down. He so wanted to keep on the adventure going and said, stick with me, and it will be okay. But it wasn't okay. It was a big mistake of him to think he knows what's coming up and down, like the river. We didn't know that river. And saying it's okay when we don't have actually a map and we never studied that river before and it's the rainy season was quite irresponsible. The other way, where our two other friends, they chose another way, it was much safer. I wanted to go with them. But my relationship with Kevin was as such that I yielded. I didn't want to let him down. So there was all this complexity. And so I thought, for sure, he's coming after me, and together we'll be fine. There was one more detail. When the raft crashed against that rock, there were a few minutes that we were together, locked on that rock, and he made it to he jumped, and he said, like, I'll get to the bank, throw me the machete, I'll cut some vines, I'll sew it back to you, put both backpacks on you, and I'll pull you. And he managed to do that. He managed to make it to the bank, and I threw the machete after him. But at that moment, the raft just tipped over. So he had also the machete. And machete, if you ask what would you take to the jungle if you would take only one thing, the answer is machete. There's no question about it. That's the basic survival tool in the jungle. He had a machete, I didn't. So Kevin, with all this complexity, of the relationship and also his strengths and the responsibility and the machete were coming down. And then a day passes, and another day passes. And I'll tell you in advance, the worst thing that one can have in such circumstances, you'll be surprised, baby, is hope. Hope is the most dangerous thing. Because if you cling to hope so much, and when suddenly there is no hope, it's shattering experience. The two worst moments in this misadventure were moments where I was clinging to hope. The first one was waiting for Kevin, with the hope that he will connect with me, and then for 4 days I was walking up towards him. I was, trying to signal, to scream. 4 days alone in the jungle, and he didn't come. After 4 days, it was the fourth night alone. I knew he's not coming. I knew he's not coming. It was impossible. 4 days, if he didn't, I knew he wasn't coming. And I broke. I broke. Because the only thing I had was the hope that he would come, and he didn't. So I had no hope anymore. So when you say, like, okay, there's a light in the tunnel, but that light extinguishes, that's the feeling. That is like the dark night of the soul. There is no light of hope anymore. I'm alone and I'm not going to make it. And realizing that, as I say, is the moment where my dream turned into the worst nightmare possible. I realized I'm going to die in a very unpleasant way, alone. Will it be beast, disease, famine? Uh, I knew one thing. I don't have what it takes to survive in these circumstances. This was my state of mind. I don't have what it takes to survive alone in these circumstances. The circumstances, see, it's like, I don't know. I even the movie couldn't show the real circumstances. They didn't have the budget, to show how tremendous nature was, the floods and the massive rain and the elements. Also, it's not only a question of of budget. It's a movie. They had 2 hours. I was 3 weeks alone. How much can you cram into these 2 hours? Um, and also another aspect, things happen many times the same thing. Um, for example, being bitten by insects, which was the worst because I had all my body was like bitten. There was not one spot that wasn't bitten, but there were worms, the larvae that turned into worms under my skin. So you can show it once, but I was there all the time. Or there's like um, quicksand, not quicksand, swamps. So I fell into swamp. They show it in the movie, but then I fell into the swamp again. They will not show in the movie the same again. What I mean, in life, it's so much more what I went through. And jaguars, there were jaguars around me every single night. I couldn't sleep, and I knew that the jaguars are out there. I knew there was no morning that I didn't see their traces in around me. So the horror, the fear of the night, just knowing that these predators are out there, no fire, no gun, no machete. Um, but we're talking about the dark night of the soul. That there's something to be taken from it as well, Sid, is that um, it's a moment of total surrender. Um, because I knew that I'm nothing. At that moment, my ego was completely crushed. That young man that was, I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to find tribes. I'm going to marry the daughter of the chief. I'm going to be rich and famous. The vanity. I'm on, and all the elements are laughing at the vanity. Where is that hero? Crushed, zero, broken. It was humbling, um, in a very dramatic way, and you don't forget such events. When your ego really breaks, as in, that there's nothing you can do to help yourself, that you mean nothing and that you have nothing, and you know it. In a way, that's maybe the most powerful transformational experience one can have, because to crush the ego to that degree uh, is healthy. The ego needs later serious rehabilitation, but which is positive. But I don't think many people experience that crush of the ego completely, and that is actually a beneficial thing to go through, because once you went through a total crush of the ego, that understanding that you have nothing, and if you imagine that you have, it can be taken from you in a second, and you've got nothing. You don't forget that. So then powers are back. You don't have vanity anymore. You use the powers more as a service than as self-service. There's some transformation that can only happen through such experience, and it did. So that night, I cried. I felt that, that breakdown of my personality. But then came the morning, and in a sense, I knew that this, even if I want to die, or I know die, sitting here and crying is not something that is sustainable. I cannot. I'm hungry, like, and then a new game emerged through me, which is an expression of life itself. Life is do what you need to do to keep it. That's actually the most basic thing. Life is sacred, life is dear, and wants to life wants to stay alive. It's not even you. It's like the force of life wants to sustain itself. It's beyond your personality. And that's started coming into play. Instinct, survival started coming into play. And back to you, Sid.
Wow. I mean, I can't even believe. I know you said the movie was only 2 hours. Um, okay, so I want to talk about the psychology part because you said that after fourth day you knew you were not meant for this. For you, you thought this was the end. This is where my life ends at such a young age, 22-year-old. So, and you managed to survive 3 weeks in one of the harshest environments on earth. Uh, as you said, starvation, predators, infections. So my question to you on psychology is, how did that constant cycle of survival and setback affect your internal psychology, especially during those intense 21 days that you were there?
Mhm. That's and something amazing. It's something so awesome and magnificent and awe-inspiring, because there is a life force. There is a life force. Yeah. And this is like in my discovery that life force is separated from your self image, and what you think of yourself and your capabilities is one thing, but that life force is another thing. So it's not a question of being self-motivated, you know, or being resourceful. Surprisingly, it's not. And I know there's like other survival experts, that they teach how to deal with circumstances. My experience, there's no need. Survival, you are an expert. You just need the circumstances to realize that we are all survival experts. That's something innate in us. We are survival experts. We just need the proper circumstances to realize that. And it started manifesting, like as soon as that fifth day when I left the banks, stopped waiting. And there was like one event that was a major event that something that actually was very transformational. It was, as I said, it was quite immediately. The 4 days were basically waiting and clinging to hope. Then the hope was taken, and then it's my fifth day, which is the first day where I decided actually to take action, and I was walking downriver toward civilization that I knew it's hundreds of miles away, and there's no trail, and I had no way to deal with it. Still, it was the only thing I could do, like walk toward civilization. And I haven't eaten in this first few days because I was stationary, and I eaten a couple of snails that I picked up, and I tried to get a palm tree and get to the heart, but since I didn't have a machete, I actually dug it with my fingernails of the rock and then crushed. When finally the tree collapsed, I broke it with a rock. It was a lot of effort to get the crumbs of the heart, and I think I spent more energies than I got from it. So there wasn't much food that came in these 4 days. And then as I was walking in the forest, and also for people to understand, jungle is, yeah, I mean, in terms of the biodiversity, there's a lot of species in the jungle. And this particular jungle, the Madidi, where all this story happened, is the richest of all. This is the heaviest biological footprint. There's more species in the Madidis than any other place on planet Earth. But still, it's not like in Kipling's Jungle Book where there's coconuts falling and bananas, and you're just walking in like a very, roots are very rare to find. Maybe if you're indigenous, and even if you are indigenous, you need some tools, like a machete to dig some roots or to collapse a tree, because otherwise the trees are very tall, and even if there is a fruit, go get it. And if the fruit is down on the floor, then somebody got there first, rot or worms, or so it's very hard to scavenge and and collect and harvest from nature. It's not that paradise that when you're trying to survive there. Let alone rainy cedar when it was constantly um, raining hard. So I noticed a fruit on the ground, and I pick it up. I think I've been in this jungle for a month or with the four of us. Yeah, this was after the journey. Before the accident, we were hiking, and so we had a guide. He wasn't native, but he was very knowledgeable. Yeah, and so I knew this fruit. It's a fruit that when you press it, it splits into three, and it's called trestepita. That's at least the name that he taught us. And inside, there's a few little seeds, and of the seeds, there's some sweetness. So it's not much. There's not much in it, but at least some sweetness you can derive from that. So I picked up that trestepita and I ate it, and I noticed that there's many on the tree, and I decided to climb on the tree and get more of the. And somehow pull myself and get to the fruit. And as I reached for the fruit, there was a fruit snake on the branch. And immediately the fruit snake contracted. And now this is, first of all, I knew it's very venomous. I knew it's deadly because it was one of the things that I learned in the journey. This is that green fruit snake is deadly. But I was almost touching it. And now the circumstances is that the snake contracts and coming. This is not something even calculate. It's splits of a second, the speed of the things happening. So in a split of a second, there's nothing that you can do. You cannot think yourself out of the circumstance and make decisions. There is no time for you to intervene. And then the intervention is obviously not me because I don't have time to intervene. And it's like watching a movie because I'm not doing anything, but my body immediately knew to let go of the branch, and I fall off the tree. So as the snake coming, I just fall, and I'm falling down off the tree. There's a few things here. First of all, the fall which is probably like, I would say 5 meters, 5 yards, something like that, going down. It's dangerous, especially because it's still a cliff and there's rocks underneath, not just mud. But something strange happened that I'll never forget. I My feeling was that it's slow motion. My fall was stopped by a, a, a feeling of slow motion. So I saw the earth coming very slow, which allowed me to prepare myself and fall properly. And I didn't notice much because this, as I said, this was like a movie I was watching. And as I landed, I immediately took a stick. I checked it, like a dry branch that is strong enough, and back on the tree and started chasing the snake. And then with the stick, I hit the snake, and the snake fell off the tree. I rushed down after it and killed it. I killed it. And then I picked it up and, like I cleaned, pulled the skin, I pulled the guts, and I was about to eat it, but I was under a tree full of fruits. Now I cleared the danger, so I got the fruits and I kept the snake. That I may eat it later, So I kept the. So all these events, I suddenly realized, what happened, like my image and like my understanding of the circumstances start coming back, because as I see, this was like pure action. There was no intervention on my side, but suddenly I realized what happened. I was like the biggest victim in that alien environment, and there's no way I can survive. But suddenly I killed the snake. Not only I didn't run away, I came back and I fought the snake and I killed it and I peeled its skin and I'm holding the body of the snake. Who was I? And the answer came through my body. And, like what I've experienced in my body is my body was throbbing with tremendous power. I felt so powerful. It was evident, in my body. It was like throbbing with tremendous power. And my head of ice, there was nothing going on. It was just clear and total calm. My emotions, I strangely, I never felt so good in my life. I felt so in my place. I felt at home. I felt like the best I could feel. And also, suddenly I wasn't, it was all absolutely, I was in the right place in the right time. Now, this is not something I did. Again, this is was my experience of that moment. Now, it took some time to understand. Now I can speak about it. Analysis, looking back and understanding. And I can explain what happened. And I think it's important, to have this understanding. What I've experienced is sheer, pure survival. And this is an experience and the experience of survival is visceral. It's not intellectual. It's a visceral experience, which means a lot of hormones are, come into play in the body. And those hormones make you the very best that you can be on all levels, because all your faculties are needed now to deal with real circumstances of life, of and danger, real near danger that you need to deal with. So in order to deal with this danger, you need all the resources. So you're given all the resources for this moment. And all the resources means physical resources, mental resources, and emotional, psychological resources, and spiritual resources. So all these resources are given to you. And it's not up to you. It's not, you don't have to do something, you don't have to be wrong, you don't have to be courageous. This is given to you now. You're just a vehicle for life. Life expresses itself through you, and life wants to stay alive through you. That's survival. So I was experiencing that, and that's awesome. That's an awesome experience. And that but that was absolutely transformational, that moment, because even when it wore off, I knew I have what it takes. It completely changed me. I knew I'm not a victim. I knew I have the power to deal with it. And it was, I would say, a moment of awakening.
Wow, what a fascinating turnaround. Yossi, do you mind moving your camera a little bit down? Your face is getting cropped.
Sure, sure. Oh, sorry. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, that's
absolutely.
okay. That's perfect. Okay. I wanna bring the hallucination aspect here because during those 3 weeks, you have spoken about the presence of a companion, a woman who wasn't physically there but kept you moving. Now, I have two questions to you on
Yes,
this. The first one is from a psychological standpoint, how do you categorize that experience now, 45 years later? And was it
yeah,
a survival
yeah,
mechanism
yeah, yeah.
of a brain, or do you view it as something more spiritual that guided your resilience and willingness to live and survive this ordeal?
Yep. And interesting. What it brings to mind, first of all, is that it's probably something common. And I remember years later, I watched a movie called what was it called? It was a Tom Hanks. Basically, airplane crash. He find himself on an island, and he has a relationship with the basketball. And he calls it Wilson, Wilson, and the basketball becomes his friend. I forgot the name of the movie. It will come back. But it was like a classic movie, just one man alone, and a relationship with Wilson, the basketball. One of the strongest things that I've learned is that after food, like the first, like thing that I thought about was food, you know, because I was hungry all the time. I was deprived. But after food, what came was actually company. That's how strong is company, Uh, I craved company, and it was a strong realization that we're such a social animal, how important it is. Immediately after food, the thing I craved more than anything was company of other people. So uh, solitude was very hard, was very hard thing. Uh, and hallucinations were powerful because I was a very experienced hallucinator. From childhood, I spent my time hallucinating, really and it's a tool. By the way, this tool saved my life because the nights I didn't sleep. It's hard to believe, but for 3 weeks I didn't sleep at all. I wasn't sleeping at night, but I was hallucinating at night. So by hallucinating, and I didn't have to deal with the fear of the predators walking around. I was just hallucinating. So my hallucination had the power to deport me to any environment that I wanted. In the end, I was too lazy to hallucinate, so I had 5 favorite hallucinations, and I would choose the hallucinations that I already knew, and it was like watching a movie again. And like that, I could rest at night. So the hallucination was very strong. However, what you're asking is something very different. That girl, I wasn't aware that I'm hallucinating. I actually believed she was there. So it's different than hallucination. The hallucination was me hallucinating and knowing that I'm hallucinating. And I was aware that I was dreaming. But when the girl showed up, I believed she was there. Why I'm saying that? Because I was speaking to her with voice, which I didn't do in my hallucination. And the other thing is that I made a place to sleep, physical. And now she came, it was like the 17th and the 18th, for 2 days, the 17th and 18th day of my solitude I spent with her. I actually made her a place to sleep, which is extreme because I was so weak and so injured. So to actually prepare a camp for two was double effort that I wouldn't do. And it wasn't logical to do if it's an hallucination. So it already, when I discovered that she's not there, I was really, really scared because I thought I went crazy. That was my only explanation, that I'm actually crazy because I just made her a place to sleep and there's nobody there. And I'm trying to hug her, but there's nobody there to hug. It actually, it wasn't an hallucination anymore. This was a scary thing. I don't know how to explain it till this very day. So it's a bit of a tricky question because I'm not sure. I'm not sure even what does it mean, because hallucination, I know what it means. I am making up a story in my head, and that story creates emotion. But I'm its creator. But I didn't create her. So who did? I cannot answer it because my answer can be, oh, my subconscious, but that's something very vague. How do I know what the subconscious is and what it does? It's just a concept. I actually cannot. I don't know. I don't know who made it up, and it brings even deeper questions because the role of that girl was very big. There's no doubt that she came when I was in my weakest moment, and by appearing, she gave me a reason to keep on going, and that reason is amazing. The reason was she needed me, you know. So when I couldn't take care of myself, what that hallucination brought is somebody that needs me. And the moment somebody needed me, I found the power, which is by itself is incredible. Actually, I couldn't take care of myself anymore. But when somebody needed me, of course, I found the power. So that's by itself was a genius hallucination to bring something that will give me a reason to live and to keep on fighting. But I cannot take ownership. I didn't make it up. I didn't create her. And I am the creator of many hallucinations. So I know the difference. I didn't make it. So I don't know. It's very tricky till this very day to say, was it a miracle or just imagination? No, it was just imagination, but that imagination is a miracle because it wasn't my I didn't make it up. So, and I cannot tell you who made her up, but it was genius to have her at that moment because it could be anything. Somebody that's coming to save me or help me. No, it was somebody that needed my help. So by that construct was genius. Um, so like for years, I actually looked for her. For years after this experience, I looked for her, and I thought that one day I'll meet her. And angel or uh, I don't know exactly what it means, but I really think it was imagination. But as I say, this imagination wasn't my make wasn't my making. So there's no question about spirituality. For me, it was also another awakening. I have no doubt I have no doubt. I know it's not like, people can say, okay, the circumstance, I know that I was watched. I know. I could feel it. I was watched. And I cannot explain, I cannot describe, I cannot tell you that I have knowledge about who and why, but I know that I was watched. I know I could sense it. I could feel the providence. I had 100 opportunities to die, and I didn't. It was very easy to die in these circumstances. It's enough that you break an ankle and it's over. Like if you cannot move, you'll be devoured, quickly. And um, so, is it part of it? Probably, it's all part of it. But I lack, I'm pretty good of giving you answers, but this one, I just don't know what to say exactly,
So
how
you're
to
still trying.
describe it
You're
better.
still. So 45 years later, this is one of the mysteries that you're still trying to kind of figure it out, if I am not mistaken.
Yeah, that's
This
right.
is
That's right.
this is quite
Yes.
fascinating. I mean, it's unbelievable. Your story is like it is so much depth in it, and as you said, the survival mode kicked in, and something that you saw, the presence was there, you felt it, but you cannot explain. In itself is a mystery that will stay with you for the rest of your life. You know. So
Yes.
wow. Okay. Uh, I want to talk about so after you were rescued. Actually, before I go that, I want to talk about Kevin. He actually just did not survive, but he came back for you when many would have given up. Now, in the context of resilience and
Absolutely.
survival, how much was it an internal battle for yourself, and how much was it fueled knowing that there was someone still out there looking for you, especially Kevin?
The last few days, it came into play. Um, Actually, I told you I had about 5 hallucinations that I would just choose. And usually I would do all the 5 in one night in different order. One of them, which was, like I cannot say my favorite, 'cause all of them were my favorites. These hallucinations was me traveling to Oregon to let Kevin's parents know that he died. This was one of the hallucinations. Um, I thought Kevin died. I actually didn't think that Kevin is coming back for me, because my conclusion after the 4 days that waiting for him, I thought that what he did is not walking on the cliff towards me, but jumping after me into the river. And I knew that if he did that, he would die, because I had at least for most of the time, I had the raft to protect me when I went down these rapids. And if he jumped after me, seeing me taken away, I was sure that that's what happened. That Kevin, being Kevin, jumped after me, and then he died. So part of my hallucinations was I'm going to meet Kevin's parents and tell them how great he was, what the best friend, and how we became so close, and that he never made it back. So my state of mind was that Kevin is not coming after me, and you know. But on the 17th day, there was an airplane that passed up in the sky. And when the airplane passed up in the sky, even though it passed, that sense came to me. I knew that Kevin is there. I just knew that it was Kevin. And it also makes sense. Why would they come? Somebody told them, and somehow Kevin, I knew it was Kevin. It was just a feeling, but I believed it was Kevin in the airplane. And I was right. Kevin was in that airplane. But that gave me a lot of hope. It's only the last 3 days, from the 17th day, I knew, like, they are looking for me. My terrible disappointment is that nothing happened. Not the 18th day, not the 19th day. Like there was no sign of another airplane, a helicopter, nothing. But I knew, and it changed my state of mind and actually affected my decisions of what to do. When I realized, or at least I saw, I wouldn't say that this was a major component of me staying alive. No, no. First of all, I wasn't sure. And I remember on the 20th day, when I found that playa, I found that opening, I was on the verge of, I wouldn't say dying, but I wasn't even on the verge. I collapsed. I already collapsed, and I knew I'm not getting back on my feet. You know, I found the power to keep on going, but once I got to playa, I knew there's no way I can do it again. I cannot get up again and try to walk down river. I was already, Sid, after 20 days, I was there was no tissue, nothing. There was just skin that was open and rotten, and there was nothing to consume. There was no muscle. There was no. It was just, like I was just a skeleton, and my feet were raw. There was no skin. There was just infected flesh, and so I knew that I'm not getting up again. But what I thought that and it was 3 days without anything happening. So I started giving up on the search that I thought is happening, and I thought I made another plan. I don't know. I think I wouldn't have made it, but my plan wasn't to die waiting. I thought I'll rest for a few days until I'll be able to stand up on my feet again. And instead of trying to walk, I will build myself a shelter here, and I'll just try to survive instead of walking down river, which is every day a new ordeal, floods and animals and treacherous passes, like with thorns that I don't have a machete. And instead, I will just stay on one place and I'll wait for the dry season, and then I'll attempt again. So this was my state of mind. But, luckily, as we know, Kevin did come back, and I would just tell you about Kevin. He had every reason not to come back, at least externally. Everybody told him, don't come back. All the experts, they told him, don't. The indigenous people, they told him, one of ours wouldn't have survived. This is the worst rainy season in decades. You never saw him coming out of the waterfall of the rapids, and he probably died right there or injured. There's no way he survived for all these days, and there's no way he's alive. And thank God you survived. Go back home. And everybody told him that. Let alone after the airplane, because it did manage to move the Israeli consulate enough to put enough pressure on the Bolivian to send an airplane that wasn't even searching, because there was no reason to search as far as the pilot and the Air Force. There was nothing to search. Kevin didn't give up. He had all the reason to say, I did everything I could, and but he didn't. More, I'll tell you. In the life experience with Kevin always refused to receive my gratitude. It actually would upset him that I say, you saved my life. He said, no, you saved my life. That was Kevin's attitude. And if you wouldn't have held on and I wouldn't find you, I couldn't live my life, So thank you. You saved my life. He reversed it. The nobility of character of Kevin, So it's I cannot even say that I would have done the same for him, because it's easy to say. He did it, So I would say, I would have done the same. It's easy to put words. He actually did it. So for me, he's the real hero of the story. is Kevin. You know, I'm also the hero. I'm also the hero, but my heroism was different than his heroism. His heroism as a choice, and that's a big difference. He made a
Wow.
choice to go. Yeah, I didn't have a choice.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah,
Um, I have a couple of more questions before we wrap this up. So after you were rescued and recovered, you began to document your journey, which eventually came back from QG and later the film Jungle. At what point did you realize that your private battle for survival in Amazon was not just a personal story, but a blueprint for a global message on human resilience? You were the hero of human resilience. You are the human hero of resilience as of today.
yeah. Uh, Actually, even though I was inspired by a book and all that, I I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it. I actually, what happened naturally is I realized that my story is exceptional and everybody wants to hear my story. From the moment I was saved, my saviors, they wanted to hear my story. And then the doctor in the jungle town, and then everybody else. And, everybody wanted to hear my story. Combination of a very good story and a good storyteller. And time I came back to Israel, which was 6 months after the event, 3 months basically mainly hospital, but 3 months also carnival in Brazil. You know, for me it wasn't like something happened, I have to go home. No, I kept on traveling, and even though there was a big pressure from my parents, eventually I came back to Israel, and in my head I just came to pacify my parents so they relax and I can get back on the road. I wasn't done with my adventure. I didn't see it as wow, the big adventure. Now I can settle. And I was eager to go back. I found until this very day, Sid, my true home is on the road. That's my true home. I don't know if you know from your research, but I don't live in a home. Even though I have a home, I sleep outside in a tent as a way of life for decades. I sleep outside the house, and that's where I feel I belong as a nomad. I see myself as a nomad, as a traveling soul, and that's the essence of life and my life. Like just being on the road. So, um, but when I came back to Israel, the story has arrived before me, and a publisher approached me and said, "Well, we heard about your story, and we want you to write a book." Even then, when I wrote the book, which was actually in the beginning, I thought I'll need help from somebody to help me write it. But then the publisher said, we don't work like that. You write it and then we'll edit it. Just write it your way, don't worry, and then we'll edit it. And when I started writing it, it was a cathartic experience. I didn't realize that I remember to that very detail everything that happened. So my typos and grammar if you need so, but nobody's touching my book. And I left the publisher because they wanted to edit the book. I left it. It's a very accurate journal of what I've experienced and very fresh. So then I went to another publisher. It was the biggest publisher in the country, and they immediately signed me and they took the book and they didn't edit it. The book, for me, in retrospective, if I'm embarrassed. It's so raw that I'm embarrassed. When people ask me about the book, I said, "No, watch the movie. You better watch the movie because it's so raw." But the power of this book is because it's so raw, and there's no author that tries to make things nice or goes into analysis or some whatever, ranting about something or trying to prove his prowess as an author. This is just a story that happened to me as a young man, and that same young man told that story. I was immediately after the journey, 6 months later than when I wrote this book. Um, but even with the biggest publisher in the country, countries, they told me, well, if it's a bestseller, you'll sell 5,000 copies. So the aspiration even to be a bestseller wasn't that big. This book today is one of the only books that never was never out of print. You know, it's like it's not a bestseller; it's a cult book. That's how the same publisher describe it in their catalog. The cult book was never out of print, still in print, and it became a phenomena in other countries. It translated to some 20 languages. Was done as initially as a docudrama with Channel 4 and the Discovery Channel, and then eventually also a Hollywood movie. So there's something about this story that touches people. There's something about the story that as a power to to heal and instill strength in people, and that's a big honor for me. It's a big privilege that as you know, there was no intention. When I wrote the books, there was no intention. It was a very cathartic experience. But when the book became, like was published, in a sense, the story wasn't mine anymore. It didn't belong to me. It was like public domain, that story, and I became servant. And I told that story on incredible stages, with luminaries that, I would always only dream that I could have been with the same luminaries on the same stage, sharing my story, mainly in corporate environments, but in any environment that ask me. And it touched many hearts, and contributed to transformation of and it allowed me actually to expose a part of myself that I didn't know, um, and I became international because of this book, allowed me to be relevant in many different countries around the world. And it brought me back to the Amazon. It actually not directly, not my, this is not nothing to do with the book, but I came back to the Amazon, and this is another chapter that I wrote with my life. I went back to the same place and lived there for 3 years, and wrote another beautiful chapter in which is the closure maybe for this story. So it definitely changed my life. I don't have a life to compare what would have happened if not. So I don't know if the other life would have been better, maybe, because when it caught me, when the book just was published, what changed my life is the publication of the book, not my story. If my story wouldn't have been published, I would just, I told it to everybody that knew me, and basically I would just be, I don't know, I would have a career. I was aspiring to be in the advertising industry. I want that fascinated me, and I studied marketing and advertising, and I would probably be some, I don't know, some businessman. But as life wanted, it took me to another direction. So definitely it had a big effect on my life in that sense. I live a different life, and I'm still at it. I don't when I'm telling you all this story. This story never became irrelevant for me. I never felt that I'm regurgitating it. Even this interview, I still fascinated that I can feel, and that my perspective that comes today is different than any perspective that was like this story never was told twice the same, ever. It was never told the same, because it's live, it's authentic. I'm not reciting, I'm just like bringing it back, and the person that brings it back is me now. So that interaction between me now and that story is always dynamic. And so It allows that story to always be fresh and relevant for me, and audience can feel it if you're just, they can feel if it's a living energy or not. And I think you could feel it now in this interview. That is not like I didn't look at the questions that you sent me because I don't need them, like I rather be challenged with fresh and be spontaneous and authentic, you know.
No, no, it is touching and it has touched me. And the more I'm listening to you, the more I'm intrigued by your story. More than your story, I'm more intrigued and fascinated by your personality and your persona on life. I think to me, that is very, very important. Adversity is a part of life, but the choice word, how you choose what you want to do with it afterwards is how you decide where your life goes. And the path you have taken is an immense source of inspiration for people like us and everyone else who will be watching this and who have watched your other episodes. And also to our audience, we have the link of the book, of Yossi's book, in the description below. So feel free to get it, read it. Once again, this is just an hour and a half long interview, but you have to live those 21 days by reading each chapter of those books. So, final question for you, Yossi, is you brought up the
Please.
closure part, and that's important. So you have described your experience not as a tragedy, but as a profound gift that shaped your life. How did you dismantle the fear or potential trauma towards the jungle? And where did that processing, or let's say closure, finally set you free?
Well, I don't know if it set me free. I never thought about it this way, like I also I'm not sure I understand your question about closure. You mean my return to the Amazon and my work there with the Uchupiamona, the people that were involved, or I
So,
just if you can
so,
direct
so the
me.
closure means going back to the jungle, going back to the Amazon,
Oh,
thinking about it, because that's a place of trauma of 21 days, which you see it as an opportunity to rebuild your life, to reshape your life. But still, you pass through those
yeah.
trauma for 3 weeks.
Well,
So, how did you
yeah,
manage that, and how did you get comfortable
yeah,
with the idea of Amazon again?
yeah. You'll be surprised, Sid. I never had any trauma. I had no trauma. I didn't have to deal with trauma because I had no trauma. In the 40 years that passed, I didn't have any one nightmare because there's no reason for nightmare. Like I wasn't in trauma. Even while experiencing it, I didn't see the jungle or nature as my enemy. Even while experiencing it, part of my hallucination, where one day I'll come back here with my kids and show them, like the jungle was never the enemy. I understood the irresponsibility and the stupidity of putting myself in the circumstances where having no fire, having no machete, like the basics that, like, but the jungle, I love the jungle. And so for me to come back to this area was joy. Nothing to deal with my trauma or healing. I didn't need any healing. I never had a session with any therapist about this story and never needed. And so I'm not like a survivor of a trauma. I'm a survivor point, we all are, I just had the privilege to learn about survival firsthand and have the self-discovery, as you mentioned in the very beginning of this interview, that it's about self-discovery. I was lost in the Amazon in order to discover myself, to find myself. So I was inspired by this story, and I never told it as a victim, and I never was a victim of the story. So there was no issue in some professor of trauma actually came to study me and said, trying to understand, because there's so many people with post-trauma, but I had no post-trauma because there was no trauma. And I came back to the Amazon for closure, but in the most, uh, you know, simple way. The people that were involved in saving my life, there were one of them was Tico Tudela, the owner of the dugout canoe, that volunteered himself and in great danger, and that's you know, no insurance. Kevin has no money to pay even for the fuel. He doesn't know me. I'm from a different race, from a different nationality, from a different religion. What kind of affinity he has to take his boat and go upriver and risk his life for me? I could never understand it. It's something beyond my understanding. So I wanted to see Tico Tudela and thank him. And Tico Tudela couldn't do it alone. So two indigenous people, actually, same tribes that found Kevin in the river and saved him, same people, two hunters jumped into that boat, Geronimo and Pablo. Both died recently. Um, and well, they maybe had some interest because they had an opportunity to hunt on the way. They're like avid hunters, but still they volunteered to search for me and guide Tico on that river. But also they had opportunity to hunt monkeys in territories far from the village. And I became great friends of both of them later. But this was the first time I came back. It was 10 years later, 1992. It's the first time I came back to look for them and thank them. And when I met them, was very emotional. And then Tico first in the jungle town, we were in Abaque, and I asked him to take me to San Jose or to Piamona, which is some journey of 6, 7 hours, 8 hours, depends on the river, and with a dugout canoe up the Tuichi River to where the only tribe that still lives in the Madidi, the only tribe that is so remote and live Amazonian life as opposed to the other tribes that are already more cultured, so to speak. So it was that encounter that was quite dramatic, because in that encounter, I had my Spanish that was fluent when I was traveling 10 years later was very rusty, and I stuttered my um, they brought the entire village out. It was a big thing for them that anybody comes, anybody, let alone me, returning cares about them. For sure, not the authorities, the government, nobody cares about them. And there's no nobility as we think about the tribal people, the naked savage. There's no nobility, just poverty, you know. And
Wow. Yossi, I mean, what a fascinating conversation this has been, Um, and I don't know if you can hear me. Oh,
I
okay, there
can, I
you are.
can.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. The reception internet was not good. So, well, Yossi, uh, all I have to say is your journey from the heart of the Amazon to where you stand today is extraordinary. You have given us, our audience, more than a narrative. You have offered a profound shift in perspective for anyone currently navigating their own dark chapters. To our audience, my message is if this conversation moved you, please share it because in the world of digital noise, your attention is what keeps the stories of resilience alive. By listening, you ensure these oral histories remain a permanent resource for generations to come. Yossi Ginsberg, I want to thank you so much for your vulnerability, your time, for sharing your unique unfiltered, raw perspective, as you say, with us all today. And if there is anything you would want to say to our audience, please take it away from here.
Well, I'll be short because I wasn't before, and this is the end. Where it all started. That's the closure for me. Every time, I tell my story. My conclusion is still life is your story, and your duty is to be the hero of your own story. And hero is responsibility. Hero is not just a word. Live your life as a hero and be what you can be. It's your duty. It's your duty. It's not your right. It's your duty to be the hero of your life story. You're not an extra. You're the main protagonist of this story. And life is a great adventure. Go out there and walk your own paths.
Yossi, thank you so much once again. Thank you. I know you took a time for us, and uh, it's absolute an honor to
Thank you.
have you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You take care. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
Same
Bye-bye.
here.
Bye-bye.